Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is John, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
My name is Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And my name is Lance, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And I'm the only loser.
It's okay.
Or maybe you're ahead.
Maybe, I don't know.
This is better for you,
Maybe I just
probably.
look at it. I'm going to look at it from a different light.
You're a blank slate.
Yep. So today we're going to be discussing episode 5 of the show titled South Will Rise Again. We will not be spoiling any of the comic and by extension any future plot lines of the show. We will be discussing the details of the series through episode 5, so pause this and go watch the show before you listen to any of the rest of this episode. You can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast.com. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter. You can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air and talk about it. So send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or the podcast in general. Any quick words before we jump in, gentlemen?
No, sir.
No? All right, cool. So the teaser, this first segment here, it opens in Ratwater with Cowboy McTavish riding through town. He stops by the pharmacy to get a prescription filled and is told to come back tomorrow. He goes to the saloon, sees a man dropping some scalps off, gets a room and sits down. There's a preacher in the background telling a dirty joke, and the preacher recognizes Cowboy McTavish, and he gets up and leaves. Next day, I think I missed something there. The Cowboy McTavish sees something going on in the back room there. It looked like there was a gentleman dead on the floor, and so this kid was being forced to watch his mother get raped, I believe, was what was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that happened. And then the next day, Cowboy picks up his prescription, leaves town, runs into a family heading towards Ratwater, turns around and goes back to the saloon, decks the preacher, walks into the back room with the family he ran into, and they're trading in some scalps. He promptly gets beat up by the preacher and his henchmen and leaves. Preacher recognizes Cowboy McTavish from the Civil War, tells the cowboy that he's never seen anyone more in love with killing than him, shoots the cowboy's horse. Cowboy walks all the way back to his house to find his wife and daughter's corpses being pecked out by birds, puts on his holster and gun, and end the scene. So what do you guys think of that?
It was pretty. It was a pretty dynamite opening. Like,
Yeah.
I almost didn't want it. I didn't almost. I super didn't want it to end.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, if there's a whole episode about the cowboy as he is known in the show, then I'm totally into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because spoilers for the comic, but not. He's the best character in the comic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, he's pretty awesome.
he's not the best character, but he's probably my favorite.
Well, that whole scene in general was very, the music was intense.
Music,
I don't know if
the
you
music
caught,
reminded me so much of Kill Bill.
Yeah.
And I thought it was awesome. Like
It just kept building and building, and
It was
gets to
by the end. It was
yeah.
crazy. Yeah, it was just noise. Almost, it wasn't even music. It was so sweet. Yeah, everything about that was really good. I think Graham McTavish, the casting of Graham McTavish caught me off guard at first.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great. I mean, I really like Graham McTavish. And in the episode where they first introduced his character, when Alex and I were watching it, I was like, "Who is that?" And he had already, because it was just like straight silhouette,
Right.
and I couldn't make it out. And I was like, I got really excited because I figured it was the character that I think that it is. And Alex had already watched it, so he knew who it was, and he was just looking at me, waiting for me to figure it out. And when I was like, "Oh my God, it's Graham McTavish," I almost said Craig McTavish, who was a hockey player. No, it is Graham McTavish, and he just started cracking up because I was so into it. But it's the sequence was really good. I think that the grit and grime of the Old West is really captured really well.
Yeah, definitely.
Like if you've ever watched Deadwood is so gross.
Yeah.
It's just so grimy and it's very just nasty.
Right.
And it just seems like you wonder, how did people live? Like you watch something like that and knowing that it's relatively historically correct, it makes you just go, man, people today are soft. Like people were so much harder back then just to live, just to get up in the morning.
We're way cleaner now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But this did a really good job, I think, of also representing that.
Totally. It made me want to learn more about the cowboy. Like seeing that and like knowing what little I know about him and what he's now been through, as this preacher's explaining, like, I know you from the war and you like to kill people and blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to know what this dude's deal is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was from Virginia, or he said he was part of the Virginia infantry or whatever, and the other guy was from Ohio. So
North and
the,
South.
The cowboy would be in the Confederate Army,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Virginia.
so. Yeah,
Is
probably.
that's South?
It's hard to remember.
That would be south.
I don't
yeah.
exactly know where the line is. I didn't.
Yeah.
Berkeley's notorious for having the worst history book in like the entire like nation. So
I actually feel like I'm totally failing as somebody who really enjoyed history, but I was never huge on the
Right.
Civil War. I was more on the Revolutionary War.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was really cool, and I think my memory's a little hazy on. He gets sent out to get medicine.
right,
They
Mhm.
think his kid is sick,
sick.
and so is the implication that the sickness spread and they both died? Could he have been gone for that long? You know, or do you think
Right.
that they were
I
killed?
think
That they were shot?
She
and-
said it takes like 3 days to get there. I think in the
Okay.
episode where he left, and then it's so you can only assume it takes about 3 days to get back. But he
was on
lost
foot.
his horse, so he
Yeah.
had to go back by foot. So I'm assuming like I can't tell if they were murdered or if they died from the sickness. It's really hard to tell. I think in that little
Yeah.
clip, but
Yeah, they were rotting. They were so it was
right, they
probably,
had been there for a while.
Yeah, I
They
don't
were
know.
probably just shot or something,
something like that. Yeah,
and he just never made it back.
yeah, but I don't
Okay.
think I don't know. It's
Well, I like so clearly the lesson is that he went back to try to help somebody who
Right.
didn't end
Mhm.
up needing help, and because he went back and stuck his neck out,
Yeah.
he ended up being cost to his family. Is kind of what we're led to believe.
Right.
So I'm kind of inclined to think that they died of whatever illness was sweeping through.
Yeah, he was just
Um,
late. Like she told him specifically a couple episodes back, like don't be late or don't get caught up or something
Right.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
just
yeah.
get back ASAP.
Yeah.
And so he,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that the part of what will shape this character into what we know is to come is
Mhm.
that he tried to do something good and instead got slapped in the face by God,
Yep.
as
Yeah.
it were.
Yeah.
That no, sorry, bud. Like if you had just been selfish and gone back, you may have saved them, but instead they're dead. And
Right, like,
He
as
just-
if like the selfishness is part of his nature, and by stepping out of that box, like
he just got punished.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And instead he just like suits up. And what's he gonna do next?
He's gonna go mess some stuff up.
Right.
That's for
Rat
sure.
water, town
Yeah.
of Ratwater, which
Gonna
is
go
the name of
clean-
the whiskey as well,
Go
right?
clean out the town. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Speculating, as they say.
hmm
Any other thoughts on that, Lance?
No, it was really cool. I liked how long it was. You know,
Yeah.
I was expecting it to end at some point, and then I was like, no, it's gonna keep going. It's like well, the whole episode would be fine of this.
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
Yeah, but it's nice how they're just building on it, you know, and how they're gonna relate it to modern times is
For sure.
should be cool.
I will say that I need to correct myself. It was not Cowboy McTavish in the church in that scene in the last episode.
Mm.
Alex pointed it out that he was pretty sure I was wrong. He texted me and told me, and then I went back and rewatched the episode and was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely wrong." So
Gotcha.
was not. I got a little, preemptively excited over that sort of thing, but
Yeah,
my
when-
bad.
I didn't notice it, but when you said that, I kind of hoped it was, but I was like, I'm not sure how.
It was
that
just some
would
other
be.
old man with a sweet mustache. Is what it
Yeah.
really ended up being.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
good facial hair in this show,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
The one thing that's kind of cool is I've been listening to the Preacher Insider podcast, and they were talking about episode 2 as they call it, but episode 3 as the rest of the world is probably going to call it.
Because we can
and-
count.
Yes, and we start at 1, and they talk about how in that episode Jesse doesn't actually appear until probably the end of Act 1. They said it's like a solid maybe 10 minutes into the episode before you even see Jesse.
Okay.
And that was just a little thing that the director said that he kind of enjoyed, was that they were able to, they have so many good characters and so many good stories going on that they're able to not, he goes, the show's called Preacher and you don't even see the preacher for the first 10 minutes. or
Right.
whatever. And in this episode, again, it was this whole opening act was based solely on not only a different character, but 100 years ago.
For sure.
150 years ago.
Yep.
It is cool that the show is just robust enough that it's able to do that.
Definitely.
Very nice.
All right, so Act 1, the scene opens with the sheriff investigating some sounds in the middle of the night outside of his house. He sees that it sounds like it's just nothing, looks like something over by the garage, by the shed, and he goes back into the house and starts cleaning up with Eugene. And he tells Eugene to go upstairs. Eugene calls to him from upstairs, and as Sheriff goes upstairs, he sees that someone had finished the job on the walls and left a shotgun for Eugene to take care of himself. And Sheriff asks Eugene, "Did you go go visit Tracy?" And he just apologizes. So we can only assume that he did go to visit the Loach family. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
little cool. It was a cool reveal when it had finished the job, and then he moved to the side, and you saw the shotgun
Yep.
behind him. So someone left that for him.
Arrow, scraggly ass arrow pointing
Right.
to it as
Yeah.
if he wouldn't know.
Yeah, right. So it's this whole mystery about Tracy Loach and
Eugene.
Eugene. It's pretty cool, I'd say. It's,
Yeah, and I think despite everything he's been through at this point, it just shows that he's really trying to redeem himself, because it's not like he went upstairs, saw the note, and just did the deed. Like he just steps aside and is like, I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that a lot. I'm really starting to feel for Eugene.
Yeah, it was really well done. One thing I really love about the show that I have talked about probably every week, and I will probably continue to do so, is that they cut right into it, and they show you as little as they need to in order for you to understand.
Yep.
So it was an old screenwriting thing of cut as far into the action as you can and cut out as early as you can, so to keep your scenes nice and lean. And when this first starts, Sheriff Root is just already hollering into the woods with his gun and his flashlight, and I was like, "Whoa, what? Like, did it skip ahead? Did we miss a chapter?" And then all the information you need is laid out after that. And so we don't, I feel like another lesser show or even a movie, anything would start with him sitting in a chair, and you'd hear like a little rattling, and he'd get up and then go outside and look.
Right.
And by then you're burning time in your show that you just don't need. And I think this is a really excellent approach they keep taking with this show, where they just get into it as early as they can, and then they get out of it. It's just like so rewarding to watch, to know that you don't, like, we get it. He was probably
it's
inside.
kind of like a shoot first, ask questions later kind of approach, but like it totally pays off,
Yeah, it's nice. Sometimes you might be a little bit confused right when you enter the scene, but then by the time you leave, everything makes sense. It's just really nice. It's almost like when you're watching a mystery movie, and you don't really get what's going on until the last 15 minutes, and then suddenly the whole experience is so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's kind of, even though the fact that one scene can do that, I think is just another testament to how well made it is.
Right on. All right, the next scene, Jesse and Emily are sitting in the diner discussing what happened last Sunday. Jesse's kind of like, beating around the bush, just kind of like, oh, how was it? What did we, blah, 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 this and that. And Emily basically questions Jesse, like, what's going on here? And Jesse's like, oh, I made a bet with Kincannon that I couldn't make him into, if I could make him into a Christian, that, if I couldn't do it, he could get my dad's land. Emily gets all mad at him, and she says to Jesse, you feel like you're not really yourself. And Jesse says, it's not me, it's God. And then he sits down with a group of kids in the diner that seem to, Jesse's influence on town seems to be getting around, and he's making a little bit of an impact. And so the kids in town they want to sit with him and talk to him about the scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who's your favorite something like?
Yeah. Who's your favorite gospel? Like,
who's your favorite gospel? Yeah.
Mark and something else.
Yeah,
I don't remember the other one.
It's, riveting stuff.
Should have took better notes.
Yeah.
But I think this is an interesting scene, just showing like how detached Emily is, and showing Jesse, like, just being, he just sees it as like another, today's another day, and like everybody else around him is kind of like questioning like what the hell's going on, So
at the beginning, I think it was at the beginning of this scene, we see Jesse hanging out by the tree.
Yep. Yeah, he's sitting out there
so
watching.
Anvil
the
is
sunset.
Ratwater now? It seems like.
Yeah.
Is that what we've gathered? Was that the same tree?
I'm gonna say yeah, because
From all the scalped Indians?
You could see Anvil in the distance, the same way you saw Ratwater in the distance. So I'm gonna go ahead and venture that Ratwater eventually becomes Anvil.
I didn't make that connection. I'm totally,
because he's leaning up against that tree, and the sun's coming up, and he's looking out on the city,
right?
Like almost like he's kind of having this moment of like, yeah, there's my town. I'm gonna fix it. I'm fixing it.
Right.
Just lost soul by lost soul. But but they make such a point of drawing your attention to this tree and the Cowboys story that I'm inclined to think that Anvil is the natural evolution of Ratwater.
Maybe like Anvil is just as cursed as Ratwater was, and it's Jesse's job, much like the Cowboys, to come and clean up town.
Could be. Could be.
This is me thinking on the fly,
I like it. I like how you're thinking.
Right on. All right, so after that, scene switches to Tulip questioning Cassidy, trying to figure out what exactly he is. I thought it was a really funny scene.
Yeah, that's good.
She's like, fangs. He's like, nope. It just kind of goes down the list of all these like, stereotypes of vampires. He admits to being a vampire and doesn't crave blood. He just needs it to heal. He prefers single malt scotch, which I thought was that was hilarious. And he begins questioning Tulip about who she is. So this, he flips the script on her, tells her that, he's fallen hard for her. And she tells him that she has a boyfriend that she's waiting for so they can go take care of Carlos. It clips to a quick flashback of Carlos driving the car away and Tulip yelling, "No!" And then Cassidy recognizes that Carlos stole everything from Tulip, and he tells her that her boyfriend doesn't really seem like the guy she thought he was. So interesting that Cassidy hasn't quite picked up that the boyfriend is Jesse yet. And
yeah, the those flashback scenes are so good, and they're so brief, but they're really awesome.
Reminds me of Bloodline a little bit, with the flashbacks, how they're kind of just like piece by piece giving them to you.
Right.
Very
little bits and pieces.
little rations.
Man, yeah. The first, are you talking about season 1?
Season 1. I haven't seen season 2 yet.
I haven't
you guys
either,
are in for a treat.
The
with
way
season 2.
every episode of season 1 starts with these totally out of context scenes that are just riveting. Yeah. Ruth Negga is really, really good. She's so good.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Because she has Tulip so firmly established in the current time as a certain way, and then we see her in these flashbacks, and she's totally different. It's 1 second of her one face, and it's just like, wow, she's different. She's like vulnerable and like hurt, and it's just really cool because we don't see that at all from her as it currently stands. Like, she's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I really am starting to like her more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this Act 1 ends with Jesse still talking to the kids in the diner, and Emily is kind of peering in. You see her reflection from the window.
Yeah, I love that. That was really nice.
Yeah,
because the line was Cassidy's like, maybe he's not the boy you think he is, or something like that, and then Emily's thinking that too,
Right.
So
that's her seeing this reflection of Jesse, like through the window or whatever, or maybe she's seeing a reflection of herself and doesn't know if she's who she thinks she is.
Right.
I don't know. This is me like throwing stuff out there again because I think I'm cool.
Wild man.
Yeah, I know all these wild ideas. So Act 2 opens with Donnie laying in bed, and his wife is trying to convince him to go to work. And she tells him, he's Odin's right-hand man, and it's okay to lose a fight. And she says the words, "South will rise again." She tells him that if he doesn't get out of bed, she's going to bang one of the guys from accounting.
It's a really interesting threat.
Yeah, I know. Like this, maybe they have somewhat of an open relationship of some sort. I mean, obviously, like they have some, she's into some beatings, some physicality in the relationship. So who knows what else they're into? I don't even know. And then the scene switches to the hotel with the otherworldly phone ringing, and Fiore and DeBlanc are sitting in the bathroom with DeBlanc trying to coach Fiore through answering the phone call and playing down the whole situation. I think this scene's hilarious. Like, they're literally just sitting, like, DeBlanc's in the tub, like, and this was in every commercial leading up to this episode, basically. But like, DeBlanc's laying in the tub. He's basically like, okay, like, the hello is the most important part of this whole thing because it establishes the conversation and who has the upper hand in a way. And so they're just practicing this hello over and over. I thought it was a really funny scene.
It is funny that they're just as far from the phone as they can get.
Right.
They shoved themselves into the bathroom.
And it's still ringing in the bathroom, or out in the bedroom. It's still ringing.
Yeah.
No, those two are really interesting.
Yeah.
This episode, I guess, while we're talking about them, this episode is probably my least favorite because, despite how amazing the opening is, because it feels like a lot of this transition to the next episode.
I was going to say there was this episode I feel like has a lot of really short scenes that cut very quickly, and it kind of makes it a little bit hard to follow,
and nobody gets used particularly well. Like, I feel like we don't get a lot of progress on anybody.
It's just hard to process each scene because they switch so quickly.
Yes, and Fiore and DeBlanc, they've been really enjoyable thus far, but they don't really do anything in this episode. And Tulip kind of doesn't really do anything in this episode. And Jesse talks a lot, but he doesn't really. There's not a lot of doing in this episode. It's a lot of talking, which isn't necessarily bad because it was, again, they're all really good characters, and everything they're talking about is pretty engaging.
Right.
So you can stay tuned, but there's been a lot of forward momentum in the previous episodes, and this one kind of felt like it was. And it's good. It's fine because we're at episode 5, so we're kind of at about that halfway point where everything, all the allegiances and the way, not allegiances, but the way all the characters kind of feel about everything is kind of shifting a little bit. So we're kind of setting up the second half of the
basically
season.
They've finished establishing the characters and all of their demeanor and who they are as people. And from
Yeah.
here, it's all downhill.
Well, I think you are right. Yeah, they've been kind of setting up everybody and the relationships. And now that we know most of what's going on, I'm kind of expecting it to say, okay, and for everything to be streamlined and for us to get some real forward momentum on the story. And if they spend the rest of the season kind of just lots of people talking about how they feel, I'm going to be like, well,
Right. Well, maybe that's why this had so many quick scenes and quick cuts, was so that they could finish wrapping up establishing the characters, because the next episodes are all going to be much longer sequences of particular characters and leaving some of the other ones out for the time being and following them up in a later episode or something.
Yeah.
So just some more speculation. The scene switches to Emily walking into Jesse's house. She picks up the donation money and makes a note in the ledger. She goes to take a leak, and Tulip comes out of the shadows to ask Emily where Jesse is. Emily tells Tulip that he's at the diner. Tulip looks up and down at Emily while she's sitting on the toilet, closes the door, and then there's a quick little just this look of jealousy on Tulip's face that I don't know if you guys really picked up on that or not. Like she thinks that Emily and Jesse are sleeping together or have something going on.
She measured her up.
Oh,
good.
for sure.
Yeah,
like,
up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really nice way to set that little relationship up between the two of them.
I liked the use of the sound of her peeing to just kind of
You-
help punctuate that moment.
The tensity.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so and then the scene switches to the sheriff's house. Eugene is fixing his dad some breakfast. The sheriff looks pretty frustrated, sitting at the table with his head in his hands. And Eugene offers to help him cut up his food and begins to cut it up, making all kinds of terrible screeching noises, which made me cringe. The sheriff flips out and flings the food across the room and says, "If you want to help out, maybe you should do like they said and finish the job." And Eugene gives him the saddest look I've ever seen a character give another character in a TV show, and then proceeds to clean up the food, and the scene ends. This scene made my heart hurt for Eugene. Like,
yeah. And his mom was in the background too, so
I don't like
you know the
TV
problem.
and like
This family.
she just ignores it.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Well, she's like catatonic.
Is
right?
she? I couldn't recall.
She's
Okay.
She's like
Yeah.
catatonic. I guess is the only way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, just
frozen.
sitting there, almost like Tracy Loach, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. It's Well, yeah. Continue.
Okay, well, it moves on to Act 3 at this point. So Act 3, scene opens with some Rush Limbaugh-looking dude turning the power down at the power plant.
Yeah.
So it seems like he's flipping some knobs real quick and watches the power level decrease a bit.
It seems like he's doing Homer Simpson's job.
You think so? He's just there to turn
Isn't that
knobs.
kind of what Homer does?
Yeah, kind of.
Just monitors like a gauge.
Yeah. And then it switches to Kincannon apologizing to the mayor for pissing in his suitcase and mentions that, he was at church and he's trying to make amends. And Donnie flips out and yells at Odin and he's like, tell me what the preacher said to you. And Odin just tells Donnie that preacher told him to serve God, which he will from this day forward. And, he's like, are you going to keep yelling questions at me in front of the mayor? And Odin tells the mayor to set up the meeting between the Greenacre group, and they toast to these new beginnings. And then as he's peering out the window, he says, "The sun shines when you take time to look at it." So,
Yeah, Jackie O'Haley is really awesome. He just continues to be more and more awesome.
Oh,
in this
for sure.
series. He's so just kind of an unspoken menace in previous episodes.
yep.
Yeah.
Or soft-spoken menace, I guess. It's not
Yeah.
that he doesn't speak, but even in some of his scenes, he like doesn't talk. He just makes like a noise,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just really clearly a kind of a wacko.
Right.
And then he's so cheerful in this scene, and like I just kept laughing. He's so funny, and his delivery is just so howdy doody
Yep.
all the time. And he had just so many little moments of yes he did, yes he did. He's just like this
I
foghorn
was at
leghorn,
church. Yep.
charming
Yeah.
little Southern man, and it's just delightful.
Yep. And then the scene switches to Jesse still at the diner, and clearly he's been using his power to try and help everyone in town who needs it. Tulip shows up and tells a story about Jesse shooting a Komodo dragon in the head. And she's basically trying to get him to realize who he used to be. Again, they all think that he's not who he was, except everyone in town seems to see him as like, he finally is something to them. Whereas before he was nothing, they didn't want to follow him, but now they're willing to talk to him and have him set them straight. Basically, he turns them down, saying that he's changed and that she can change too, and she can be good, and everybody just wants to be good. And then a waitress comes in and says that someone's outside to speak to preacher, and the waitress tells Eugene that he's not allowed in, so she calls to Jesse to go outside. So he goes out to talk to Eugene, and Eugene, he's like, oh, I'd like you to help me with my dad. I think he feels he's suffering for my sins, and he asks Jesse to pray with his dad, but doesn't know if the sheriff will go for something like that. And Jesse says, he'll think of something, and then it ends scene. So, any thoughts on that one, guys?
I noticed more the second time watching it how Jesse talks to Tulip, and talks to her very sweetly, like very softly, and probably it irritates the hell out of her.
Right.
So, I liked how he did that. And you guys had mentioned in the previous episode how when she got out of the car at the gas station or
Oh my
something,
God, yeah.
and he gave this look to her like
That was 2 episodes ago.
yeah, something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So it was, that's like how he handles her is I like how Dominic Cooper is handling her.
It's
Yes.
very
Yeah.
like been there, done that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's very direct with her in this like calm, and he's just like, I'm done dealing with your bullshit. This is this.
It's
So-
funny, the waitress, when she approaches Jesse, she says something is outside.
Yeah,
that wants to talk
something.
to
That's
you.
right.
And when she first said that, I was like, what? And then I thought, I immediately thought it was Cassidy, because we know he's not
Right.
He's not a human.
I thought it was
per se.
Cassidy dressed as like with his whole
With his
like,
with
sun
his-
hat and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
The poncho and
Yeah.
the hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as Jesse walked to the door, then I realized, I was like, oh, it's probably Eugene. And then sure enough, it was.
The whole
and I was
town
like,
is so
God,
mean to him.
Poor Eugene. What did he do?
Yeah, and he even sits there and he's like, the whole town hates me. My dad
Everybody
hates
hates
me.
me.
Everyone hates me. And Jesse's like, I don't hate you. Why would he hate him? Like, I don't know. So, and then, all right, so Act 4, Jesse shows up at the Loach house, and Mrs. Loach is, she asks the preacher to pray with Tracy because he has the most, he seems to have the most, the best results in praying with her. And as he steps in the house, Mrs. Loach looks outside and sees Eugene sitting in the truck and just starts smashing the hell out of the truck. And the preacher tells her, that he brought Eugene, and commands her to drop the baseball bat that she has. And she drops it and picks up something else. I don't know what exactly it was that
Looked
she
like,
picked up.
yeah, it was weird.
Like
It
a
was
jack or something.
yeah, for like a car jack.
Hold
Yeah.
on to the
Yeah, so
truck
she
or something.
grabs a jack and starts smashing at the car, and Jesse commands her to step away from the car, and Jesse goes up to the car, pulls Eugene out, and says, come on here, and tells, says that Mrs. Loach is hurting and Eugene's hurting, and he leans over to Mrs. Loach and says, forgive him. And she opens up her arms in front of this crowd that's gathered to see the spectacle before them, and she starts to embrace Eugene. And the kids, I'm assuming those are her kids. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, they focused on those two kids for some
right.
reason.
So I'm assuming
yeah.
they're Tracy's brothers, her,
Yeah.
Mrs. Loach's kids. And,
Uh-huh.
and they're just kind of looking like, what's going on, and
Mhm.
so their mom's embracing this monster of
Yeah.
a boy that ruined their sister.
You heard the music when that happened?
No, I didn't. I
It was
didn't
like a
catch
very
the
the
cue.
more you know kind of music.
Oh,
It was
really?
like dun, dun, dun. It was very cheesy,
Something
and you
like-
saw Jesse smile, and
Yeah.
you're like, what kind of show is this?
What- That's awesome. All right, and then
So I think my theory has come to pass that Eugene was involved in
Right.
the accident that put Tracy in her current state,
yep.
and I really want to know what it is for some reason. Like, I don't need to know. I think we pretty much know everything we need to. That some sort of is probably a car accident or something like that.
Yeah.
But I really want to know, because I don't know. It's burning at me now.
I don't know if it's a car accident. Is she disfigured at all or anything? Like, well,
That's true.
And
like
she
I didn't
screams
notice.
murderer at him, like
Yeah, like-
so maybe he killed somebody that was close to Tracy or something like that.
Yeah, that
Maybe-
could be true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Or
Yeah.
maybe like to Mrs. Loach, her daughter's already dead to her,
Yeah.
and she considers Eugene the murderer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a very good point. I've been kind of assuming all along that it had to do with Tracy, but maybe it was something else. Maybe the show seems to have a way of making you think something's going a certain
Right.
way and then redirecting it another way. So
Yeah, I kept thinking like, maybe like she's sitting here with this shred of hope thinking that Preacher's going to help Tracy somehow, but in all reality she just thinks her daughter's dead. Like maybe that's what's going on there. So,
Hmm.
next scene, Donnie and his wife are sitting outside eating lunch at Kincannon Meat and Power. Donnie starts telling his wife about how the preacher has some power and he's commanded him and Linus and now Kincannon. And he says, "There's nothing that you can do about it." It's he tells his wife how Preacher made him hold a gun in his mouth, and he's just a puppet. And Donnie says, "Please don't screw Russell in accounting." And his wife basically says, pretty soon Preacher's gonna get what he deserves, which is an interesting,
Yeah. I don't know.
This abuse of power is gonna come and bite him in the ass.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a pretty it's definitely a threat. Like it's weirdly
Like she might know something we don't.
Right.
Like
because she's been kind of passive the whole series so far. She's just been like, "Oh, he beat your ass and broke your arm. Sorry."
Yeah, he tried to help her at one point.
Yeah.
Right,
and she was like, "No, I like it."
He was misguided by their kid,
Right.
like, who was just trying to help his mom because he doesn't understand,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is, as the mom is trying to shed light on that situation, like here is Donnie shedding light on the Preacher, and his wife's just like, he'll get what he deserves,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the power structure in that scene was very interesting. It was
Oh yeah. It's definitely shifted from before where you thought, well, in like first episode, he was grabbing her arm and stuff like that. You thought he was the dominant one, but now with the scene in bed and with this scene, and he's
Right.
crying in her bosom, he's clearly a wimp,
right.
Yeah, and it kind of runs. It's interesting. It runs in line with something they said on the Insider podcast, where they talked about the son being a bully and the dad being a bully, and they said there's like this legacy of being a bully that's really interesting between those two characters. And they talked about how when the dad told his son to come here in the alley, like in episode 2 or something, 2 or 3, and the way the kid kind of stands there for a second and then kind of like goes, all right, and goes in the alley because he thinks he's about to get beat up because he's usually the one doling out the bullying, and then his dad kind of tells him this thing, and he actually just sets the record straight, and the kid like tells his dad like, I beat up a kid, like as a way to like impress his dad or like get his favor.
Right.
And I think that it's it seems to be the old adage that like bullies are secretly inside, they're very wounded and emotional and are hiding something and making up for it by being bullies. And so it's kind of funny watching Donnie just collapse. Like, his brain just can't understand what is happening, why he is no longer the alpha in the town, and just a preacher can just tell him something and he'll...
Yeah, and I feel like they've said the whole right-hand man thing has come up a few times now, and I think that's just people kind of putting him in his place that he's really not the top dog, like you're just the right-hand man.
Just keep reminding him, he's just a goon.
This is who you are.
Yeah, you're down a peg, like dial it back, son,
It's true.
So, all right, so the next scene, it switches to Jesse and Eugene driving in the truck, and Eugene basically was like, what happened back there? And Preacher just says that, Eugene and his dad won't have to worry anymore. Everybody's kind of like, Jesse feels as though he fixed it. I fixed the problem. No more problem. Real quick scene. And then it switches to Tulip sitting in her car outside of a pharmacy, and she puts on a mask and gets out and tucks a gun in her pants as she walks towards the place. End scene. Kind of leaves you like, what the hell's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So, any notes on that those quick 2 little bits?
Well, I realized that Jesse didn't go in and pray with Tracy.
Yeah.
like she asked him to do that, and then he's like, "No, I'm going to do this other thing. I'm going to make you forgive this guy who hurt your family."
Well, I mean, his reasoning for showing up first was to get her to to forgive Eugene. And I think he set out to use his power to do that from the get-go.
Yeah.
But he did oblige and step in the house to go pray with Tracy. He just never did.
Right. He
So,
said he was going to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just it feels a lot like Jesse is only addressing the symptom and not the problem, which is very interesting. I'm wondering,
Right.
And we still don't know too much about his ability. We don't know when it reaches its like what its half-life is essentially. Like, is what he commands going to stay in effect permanently, or is it going to wear off? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He's a little more specific about it in the comic. Once he gets the hang of it, he kind of understands
Right.
this kind of thing. To sometimes dreadful effect.
For sure.
And I'm obviously he's still kind of learning, and he still doesn't really know even what it is. And
Right.
that's the thing. Again, I'm just dying for them to just get out with it already. Like, what is it inside of him? And we're right there. We're
Yep.
right there.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
just, we're not there yet. I
No.
think it needs to happen. It's just get it out of the way. Don't save that for the finale.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's just get it on. Let's get it on. Get a move on.
All right. So Act 5 starts out with DeBlanc and Fiore about to answer the phone. And DeBlanc is playing hype man and getting Fiore all pumped to take this call. And then as Fiore stands up, the phone stops ringing. Real quick scene, but hilarious
It was good.
nonetheless. It took them that whole like process of time to
Yeah.
like get to the point where they're ready to talk, and then it's over.
Mhm. Mhm.
The look on their face is just like, oh no, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've
What
gone
do
too
we
far.
do now?
Yep. So then the scene flips to Tulip standing outside of a strip club, and Cassidy comes strolling out, and she hands him some of the drugs that she stole from this pharmacy, and they bang one out in the car, and she looks pretty unenthused, and clearly she's doing this with Cassidy as a way to get back at Jesse and Emily.
Uh-huh.
Like, you see, I don't know if you guys have ever been in that kind of situation of jealousy, but like that is a very common
Yeah.
thread of actions.
Yeah.
that
But I
takes
want to know
place.
if she knows, because she hit Cassidy, threw him out the window,
Right.
and then does she know that Cassidy and Jesse are friends?
Yes.
Oh, she does?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not so
And
sure.
Well, even if she doesn't, though, it doesn't matter. Like, the friendship thing doesn't matter. It's
She
that
just
she's-
wants to have
she's
somebody.
She's getting a
yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
You know, she's getting some,
Mhm.
and hopefully with the effect being that it's going to make Jesse jealous when he
Right.
finds out.
Yeah.
I think it's a
I don't know if I don't know if they actually have that connection yet,
Uh-huh.
but I do believe having been in similar situations myself, like it doesn't matter who it is. The
Yeah,
fact that it
sure,
happened is really
sure.
all that matters.
Yeah.
So not to get too personal.
No, but I feel you on that. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. She's kind of using him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and he uses her for drugs.
Yep.
You know? Yeah.
Precisely.
it's definitely a really healthy thing they've got going.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, at least he's doing like real pharmaceuticals instead of smoking insulation from the attic.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so then Jesse is back at the diner still helping with the townspeople, and the sheriff shows up and says that some men from the government are here to talk to him. Fiore and DeBlanc step in frame. They sit down to talk things over. They tell Jesse they're from heaven, and they explain that Cassidy gave them the runaround and that they've been real patient, but they really need what's inside of him. And they tell him, what's inside of you isn't God, because Jesse assumes that it is God. And that's basically the end of that scene. And then it switches to Kincannon, and the mayor shows up with the Greenacre group to have this discussion. And mayor brings the Greenacre group in. There's one guy from Greenacre group that's in the bathroom, and the other three step in. Kincannon pours them some booze. They sit down to toast, and Kincannon looks at Mayor and says, "Should we wait?" And Mayor's like, "It's up to you." And Kincannon's like, "Well, let's get started." And pulls out a shotgun and blows all three of them away. And he says the phrase, "Well, Mayor, we grow and we die." And he says it a few times, 2 or 3 times, I think. He says, "We grow and we die."
Yeah.
And then the fourth person from Greenacre Group opens the door and peers in, and Kincannon just blows him away and steps out of frame.
Yeah.
And then you're left with the mayor standing there all confused, like, what just happened here?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the
Yeah.
end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that whole scene took me completely off guard.
Yes.
Like, I did not see that coming at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
So
Well, I kind of felt the whole episode that the bottom was going to fall out for Jesse, that his power would, like, it wouldn't solve the town. Like, it wouldn't help out anybody. Like, because even like the bus driver, when he says, "Forget her,"
Right.
that guy's still, now it's almost like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where like Jim Carrey forgot Kate Winslet, but then when he sees her again, he falls in love with her again,
right.
So in a sick way for Preacher, though, it's a little
just
girl.
cyclical.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, exactly. So it's like, it didn't really help anybody,
Right.
You're just ruining people's lives almost.
And that's just him not understanding what this power is capable of.
right. Yeah.
And he's just sitting there like hashing, throwing out all this advice to people who, he thinks need it.
Mhm.
And he's giving them the most, like, I mean, it's just vague.
Yeah.
He's not being precise with it, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Clearly not so good as
Yeah.
we've seen so far. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure at some points, like, giving vague advice would be good because then it allows certain people to interpret things the way they need to interpret it. But using this commanding power that he has, there's no room for interpretation. Like
Yep.
these people take it deliberately at its word and do with it what they will. So
It's funny because it's kind of keeping in line with the sort of indictment of religion, the idea of Catholicism specifically, or Christianity rather, because he's just, as a preacher, he's supposed to have a direct line to God, so to speak, and he's supposed to be able to communicate with God. And then when people come to him with their problems, and he just says, "Be patient."
Yeah.
Or
use your best judgment.
use your best judgment.
That
You're
one
what-
got
like,
me.
Honestly, what the hell kind of advice is that?
And
It's
then
not
when they heard that, they were like, "Oh yeah,
exactly.
I should use my best
It's
judgment."
really,
Right.
it's really funny. It's definitely kind of, it takes a step back into that. Back into that satire territory, because the book is very everything. The book is really, it's about tons of stuff, and there's a lot going on. But at its core, there's a lot of questioning about religion,
right.
and Christianity, and a lot of like almost anger. Well, a lot of definite anger.
Yes.
But there's this element of satire to it, where it kind of almost pokes fun at it, and this scene and this whole little mini arc that Jesse has going on this whole episode is really kind of in line with that. And I thought it was pretty funny that it's just these terrible answers, and yet these people, when they hear it, they're just like, oh, as if they're supposed to go on and like everything's fixed,
Right.
and it's just ludicrous.
The way their faces change when he gives them the advice, like they look so concerned beforehand, and then he literally utters 3 words to these people, and it's just like all the weight is lifted off their shoulders.
And he
like,
looks so satisfied with
I
himself
know.
after everyone, and I'm sure that Garth Ennis and everybody in writing this is, part of them is just kind of laughing and being like, God, isn't that just the way that they probably think that, like, religious officials and stuff feel,
right, that
like,
level of
I've
arrogance.
I've
like,
blessed you with this answer. Use your best judgment.
Right.
It's like a fortune cookie. Like, it doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
fortune cookies or horoscopes, the whole bit. I
Exactly.
mean, it's all this
Yeah.
this just vague, generalizations that can apply to whatever situation. Like telling someone to use their best judgment can be used in so many different instances, like with so many different situations and things like that. So
it's pretty funny. Like, Jesse has gone and become a full blown preacher.
Yeah.
He's just kind of given these
like a televangelist kind of guy.
handing out
Yeah.
life lessons.
Yeah,
None of them are worth the
Exactly.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny. That was, in a way, almost the funniest part of the whole episode, because by the end, Jesse's just like, he's just totally high on this drug he's found, and he just thinks he's doing these wonderful things to these people. And like when you're removed from it and you're watching it, kind of like Emily, I guess, in
Right.
this episode, you're kind of like, this is such a waste of time.
and she's just gonna sit back and watch it all burn. Like
Yep.
it's gonna just turn on.
You can tell
everybody.
that she's the one responsible because she bought that TV and she's
Yep.
talking about the payments she's got to make on it,
Yep.
and like she folded his clothes at one point in his house.
She's
Yeah.
I mean, she's the mom through
Yeah.
and through.
Mhm.
know.
And she believes in him, but maybe not so much anymore. I think
Right.
she knows.
Well, she believes in what he was, not so much what
Mhm.
he is now. The whole point of that is like, everyone's questioning who he is, and while the people closest to him are the ones that are like, they're really like, who are you? The people, the townspeople who don't really know him because he hasn't been around up until, what do they say, like how long it had been since he had been around the town?
I don't think.
Well, Carlos was
specifically-
like 2-3 years ago. something
Okay,
like
so we
that.
can assume
Yeah.
that he's recently come back to the town,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
I
I don't really
think
feel like they
he-
went into that,
he's been gone since he was a kid.
right? So
Probably.
probably like, I don't know when I don't know anything about his past necessarily, but
Yeah.
but yeah, like you can assume that the townspeople have no idea who he is as a person and what he stands for and what he really believes in, and now he's created this facade that like clearly the people closest to him see right through him. And those who don't know him very well are just eating it up,
Yeah.
They think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and so does he. He's soaking it in. It's just bloating his ego.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
yeah,
It's
pretty
definitely
interesting.
it definitely went to a really interesting place.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys have any other questions that you think need to be like answered that from this episode? Like anything stand out that you really want to know? Like what's going on with this?
It's time to reveal what's going on. It's time. Like, just do it.
Yeah.
We're here. He's face to face with Fiora and DeBlanc.
I think that'll be next
Let's
episode.
be out with it. Why, or not why, but how exactly Odin interpreted Jesse's command is really interesting. And
Yeah, because he could still be following it, serving God. I mean, maybe like the people at Green.
Maybe he
Green
knows more
Acres?
about Green Acres
Yeah.
Group than we know.
Or
Yeah,
maybe
they could
his
be
idea
bad.
of what God is
Right.
not
Serve God. That could mean that I'm supposed to be like help everybody with Kincannon meat and power.
Right.
Like I'm supposed to be in charge of all this. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's asking a man of really inflated ego and power to serve God is what he's going to do with
Right.
that is pretty interesting.
Yup. He always says yup. Like even when after he shot the guy, he's like yup.
Yep.
And
Yup.
then steps away.
Yeah, he's so good.
He does that little
Yeah.
head nod
Yeah.
too, and like just walks off.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they were doing the Civil War reenactment with all the little
The
things,
Alamo.
like the Alamo, yeah, he was always like they even cut to him at one point, and the only thing he said was "yup." Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I wish we could could see a video of Lance when he does that. It's just really, you just stare
Yeah.
right in the mic and go, "Yep."
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really good. He's really like every delivery in that scene earlier where Donnie's in the corner is so funny. Like the way he turned to Donnie, he's like, "Yes, he did. Yes, he did." He's just like very
Yeah.
this little Mr. Agreeable man. It's really really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's yep.
Yep.
I definitely want them to get more into the cowboy.
Yeah.
I feel like they're gonna skip an episode. He seems to be like on one off one kind of thing.
They
They don't want to go too far into him.
Yeah, they can't open with him every time.
I
Here's
feel like
the-
I feel
Yeah.
like I need a good like 20 minutes of Cowboy. You
Uh-huh.
know, like I really want to know what's going on with that.
Mhm.
Well, the thing that worries me about the show, and I'm really loving it now. Like I liked it from the start. I liked it more than I thought I would, and now I just really really love it. And Lance mentioned, or no, John, it was when you said you don't really know, or you asked how long has Jesse been gone,
Right.
and Lance and I are both kind of like, well, we might know some things, we might
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But and you were like, well, I guess I just don't really know that much about him. And there's so much great story here that, and especially even with a new direction they're taking with the characters, they just have so much wonderful potential at their hands, and I just really don't want this to go the way of like Hannibal or something, where it goes too soon before it had a chance to finish telling everything that it wanted to tell. Because Hannibal had like a 5 or 6 year plan, and he was like, "That's it. Like that. After that, we'll be done." And I was like, "Man, just keep going. You made it halfway. Just
Yeah.
keep going. There's so much goodness to come."
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously it got canceled. So with this, I mean, I know unless because they've started it, they have to finish it, because the conclusion of the book is so amazing
Yes.
that it has to be played out on screen because I have to know how the world will react to it.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
just so good, and
Yeah.
and where all the characters land and everything is just so phenomenal and so satisfying. At least I think so.
Yeah. It is
I know
great.
some people
yeah.
felt let down by the ending of the book, and I think it's just so utterly perfect that if
No.
if
All
I
the
don't-
characters are there that need to be there.
if I don't
Yeah.
get to see it played out in another medium, I'm gonna be really bummed out.
Now, up to this point, though, like how far has the show drifted from the comics? Like, without obviously, like we don't want to talk too in depth about the comics. I'm just curious, like from that respect, like how far off of the comics are they? Are they really creating like a different timeline sort of thing, like
Yeah.
parallel universe sort of blah blah blah?
Kind of parallel, I'd say.
Okay.
Probably.
Some
yeah.
things have happened that do happen in the book, but
It's out of order.
if you were
a
gonna
little
take
bit.
a really broad stance and say like roughly what issue are they at,
Yeah.
they're still at issue 1 because
Okay.
Oh yeah.
every-
Actually, yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
they are. It's
Yeah.
almost like a prologue to the book.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I think I remember hearing on the Insider podcast that they said the show will eventually, I think by like probably season 2, pick up where the book starts, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
And I really can't wait to see that. But because, the book starts with quite a bang. And, they even said what I said earlier on in our show, that when the book starts, you're there, you're right in it. And by the end of the
Yeah.
first issue, you're like, whoa, this just hits the gas and
Yeah.
right. It goes.
Yeah.
So it is very different, and I've grown very acclimated to what they're doing, and I think it's phenomenal. I think it's really, really great, and it's
Yeah.
probably the best way to do it. Because like Alex and I said a couple episodes ago, the several people who have tried to adapt this came to Garth Ennis and Especially, I think Mark Steven Johnson was like hardline, like we want to do this panel for panel, and he was like, and Garth Ennis was like, no, don't do that, like don't do it.
Or squeezing it into like a 10-hour miniseries.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
It would have been terrible.
Yeah,
So bad.
No.
Yeah,
no way. This is the right way to go, and it's very good so far. And I haven't talked to nobody I know that hasn't read the book besides you guys is watching it. And
Really?
I find that such a bummer because I'm like, they keep asking me about it though. Like,
Well, even like that's the thing.
friends keep
Even as
saying-
someone who hasn't read the book, if anything, it's just making me want to go read the book. And like seeing how excited the two of you guys are about the books makes me want to read the book.
Dude, I'm telling you, the book is so crazy. It's
it's
so crazy.
man. There's just so much violence. There's so much depravity. There's just
But always with this weird little like sly sense of humor.
Oh yeah, it's funny. It's I mean, yeah, you could say like I said those two things, right? But it's lighthearted as well with its humor.
Right. Yeah, and I think I said in the pilot that when I heard that Rogen and Goldberg were going to make it, I was kind of like, what? And then I read it and I was like, okay, like I kind of got it.
Yeah, and like I get the little hits of like Seth Rogen's humor. I definitely pick them up like throughout, and I think he's funny as hell. So for me, like this really works. Like I think the show works really really well.
Yeah, it's basically the TLDR. I don't want to get into another like gushing about how great the book is because that's exhausting. You can read that anywhere, but they're doing really well. Like it's exactly what it needs to be, and I think
good.
If it gets canceled too early, it'll be a real shame because seeing all of this play out is going to be so satisfying.
Well, hopefully these preacher podcasts that, which by the way, we were rated. I don't know if it was actually a ranking, but we were number 3 on the list of AMC's top preacher podcasts.
I'm gonna say it's a ranking.
It's a ranking. Why would
we're in the top 3? We're number 3. You know, it's pretty cool. So. Yeah, definitely. Like,
yes, AMC themselves.
Hopefully, these podcasts will help push a wider audience into watching this show. Because even, like I said, as someone who hasn't read the books, like I love this show. I'm really pumped, and I want to see where it goes for sure. Like I'm definitely. I mean, the idea of this, you know, the whole religious thing, like as being someone who was raised Catholic and kind of denounced the religion, so to speak, like. This all interests me very much, and to see somebody pick it apart and criticize it from in like a comic form and now a television form is something that I find interesting. So hopefully others will
fasten
also
your seatbelt.
Yeah, for sure.
Ride or die. Yeah. So
do you have any burning questions, Lance? Anything?
No, just one comment. Like I think TV shows, you know, they have a different job to do, and the way they're handling Tulip and Cassidy, it was pretty economical because you know it happens a little bit later in the book, something similar to that.
Right.
But they're like, no, let's just lay it out there. So I'm interested to see where they go with that.
Yes.
I think that like you said it's they make it happen faster in the TV show. Okay, so that probably lends itself like you said, TV shows are doing a different thing from comics in a way. So like they're obviously like adapting it to a different audience or trying to, you know, and that's part of it. Like people lose interest in things so fast nowadays. Like they kind of have to just give it up like real early to be like, this is what's going on, just so you know, and then move it on down.
Which
the
is
line.
good.
It's good.
It keeps the story moving.
For
Otherwise
sure.
you're just gonna get bogged down and like.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, how many episodes have we talked about how we don't want to see Tulip ragging on Jesse anymore about doing this thing? And it's only been 5 episodes, but it felt like we sat through 10 hours. Of it.
For sure.
So it's good that things are propelling.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other final thoughts?
Can't wait for next week.
Yeah.
The episode's called Sundowner, and so I was like, ooh, that's cool. Did you see The Visit?
No,
This isn't Film Nerds. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay.
But it
the
was
movie The
basically-
Visit?
Yeah.
Oh.
The M. Night Shyamalan movie.
No, I didn't
Basically
see
about
it.
sundowning, and it was great.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Another
Anyways.
time.
Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We are also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of the show and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. If you want to hear Nick and Alex talk about film and other, you know, with a couple other friends, be sure to check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com. And the Midwest Podcast Network also has a video game podcast with me as the host. I'm John again, Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. Check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. Our theme music is the song All In by The Red Thread and is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. So all that being said, go forth and speak the good word.